Hi, this is Pam Bailey. I am co-host of Voices Unlocked, the podcast produced by More Than Our Crimes, which is dedicated to bringing voices from federal prison out to the world. And today we have a very special treat. You've been seeing a whole parade of different co-hosts over the last year or so, and that's because the co-founder of More Than Our Crimes has been in prison nearly 30 years, but he got out on February 13th. So you're going to be seeing a lot more of him in the future. So welcome home, Rob.
Thank you, Pam.
So tell our audience a little bit about just how it feels. How does freedom feel, since we all take it for granted?
It feels amazing. It's really unexplainable, but I'll try to explain it as best as I can. And I think it's different levels of freedom, and I experience them daily. So it's the freedom of just knowing that you're about to go home when the judge tell you that you release and you got this big weight that's lifted off your shoulders. And then it's the freedom of, walking out of the prison and the gates opening and you knowing that, man, the rest of your life is ahead of you. You can do, have, and do whatever you want. And then it's just the reality of going into stores and having choices to pick a grape juice versus
all
a pineapple.
All things we take for granted.
All things y'all take for granted.
Yeah.
It's the freedom of, I was telling you the other day when we did the blog post, and I was walking down the Navy Yard and walking across the bridge and just looking out over the water, which was a freedom of peace and tranquility. It's just so many things that I'm experiencing daily, but all of it is around just being free and having the ability and autonomy to do whatever I choose to do.
And in the next episode after this podcast, you're going to hear a lot more about how Rob got out. So look forward to that. But in this episode, we're going to focus on how More Than Our Crimes came to be. I don't think we've ever really explained that. But now that Rob's out, we're going to sort of use this time with you to explain what was behind the founding of More Than Our Crimes. And I think the main thing I hope you take from this story is that individuals can make a difference. You really can. Once you find your passion, something you really care about, you can find a way to do your own small thing to try to change things, even now as you see sort of rise of fascism around us. So the beginning of More Than Our Crimes came actually, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into criminal justice reform as a personal cause. And I want to give a shout out to David Simon, who's the creator behind The Wire, HBO's program The Wire, which hopefully probably a lot of you have heard of. And I had a job where I had the opportunity to interview David. And I don't remember exactly, and for those of you who know The Wire, and David Simon had worked for the Baltimore Sun, and he had reported about the inner city of Baltimore and crime and police and the revolving door between community and prison, but also how similar sometimes the policemen and the criminals are. You know? And so it was. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he talked about that world, and how actually any of us could really be criminals pretty close. We're all close to it in some way. It just clicked with me, and all of a sudden I just realized this is a cause I cared about. So I actually went back to my office at work, and I called around all these organizations saying, I'm a storyteller. Maybe you have a volunteer job for me. And nobody really, usually people don't volunteer for that. So I didn't find a home, but one day I was at a bookstore and I saw a booklet of poetry written by DC residents in federal prison. DC does not have its own prison, so everybody's sent into the federal system, which means they're all across the country. And one of the volunteer roles that was offered by the organization that produced the booklet was to respond to letters that they received from people in prison. So one day when I was taking a letter off a pile, I got yours. And I will tell you what, my all the letters were interesting just because I'm a storyteller, and so I sort of relate to discovering new things about people. But your letter stood out because one, you're a real critical thinker. At the time Rob was in DC, back, and you'll talk a little bit about why you were back, but he had come back from the federal prison in Florida where he'd been for a hearing, It was a petition to be released. So he was at the DC jail and was able to go to a program at the Georgetown University. They came in and you were able to be in classes, and you wrote about it in your letter. So you're a really critical thinker, and analyzed issues that I found fascinating, and you were also really articulate. I mean, one writer to another, I recognized another writer. So, so long story short, we connected that way, and I ended up outside of that volunteer opportunity. I wrote to you, and so maybe you can reflect on. So bring them up to date. You were been in prison for how long?
At
Since
that
what
time,
age?
it was
Yeah.
in 20. So at that time, I had been in prison. Uh, I came on with 25, so I've been in prison like almost 25 years. I had been in prison since I was 16 years old. I was coming back to the city for a motion or law that had just been passed that allowed guys like myself who've been incarcerated before they was 18 years old the opportunity to be resentenced. And this was like an amazing time in my life. Like I had seen a lot of guys that was back at the jail at that time were guys that I had seen in 20 years sometimes. We had all kind of like grew up on the juvenile block through this system. And this is why I was back at the jail.
So
And
you got my letter. What made you want to write back?
well, in your letter, you said something about storytelling, and you was just like, well, first of all, I write everybody back because I'm in prison, and like any connections to the outside world is important, and I like writing. But outside of that, it was just like we were kindred spirits in the sense that we both were writers, and you was telling me that you had took my letter, and I think in the letter I was talking about a book that I wrote and me wanting to start a nonprofit and stuff like that. And you were saying like, well, probably more than likely I can help you with that, or I do this, I write, and so that made me more eager to write back.
Yeah. So it went from letter writing, and then we talked on the phone, and I was able to visit you because you were at the DC jail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think a turning point came when you were denied your petition for freedom. And I still remember when we got the word that you were denied, I literally cried at work. I had gotten so psyched up for you getting out, and I actually had to leave work. I think I was so upset. I mean, what did that feel like for you?
Um, it's the most devastating thing that ever happened to us to that point. You got to keep in mind, like at this time, I'm watching my friends go home like every other day. And we up there and we making all these plans about what we're gonna do in the world. And after not seeing your family on a consistent basis for years, decades, now you seeing your mother every day. You seeing your a woman every day. You going into these programs, people shaking your hand. You can really hug people that you don't. Those type of things don't happen in the federal penitentiary. So like you can see outside, you can see the streets, and to have all these hopes or make all these plans about freedom and then just to have that snatched away from you, it was just like, I felt as though like I had to go back into, like I started just staying in the cell. I was actually like practicing getting ready to go back to the field.
You and I remember you saying you wrote that when you came into the jail, you took your armor off.
Yeah.
Because why did you have to wear armor back in prison?
And in a lot of ways to do a lot of time, you have to harden your heart to a lot of things. So it's like you putting this shield on. So those type of things that normal, not to say that we're not normal, but people that's in society can have the emotional capacity for, we can't because, or we don't. We try not to have because it may drive you crazy, or you worrying about it. It just messes up how you do time. So, like for instance, my grandma, I think she died in like 2009 or 2008. I'm not sure which year. And I'm talking to my mother on the phone. My grandmother, like I love her to death, is my baby. She pretty much was in the house that raised me and stuff like that. And my mother asked me, she's like, Rob, did you like mourn grandma? Did you cry? And at the time, I was just like, nah, I ain't cry, mom, but like I love her, but I just couldn't. I don't know why I didn't cry. But now I understand that when like doing all this time and you harden your heart to that sense, it's just like you have a thought process that is like people die, and that's a part of life, and I got to keep moving forward. And it was just bad.
Yeah. So you had taken, because the other thing I remember you saying, you took your armor off because when you went to the jail, all of a sudden people were shaking your hand. They were treating you like
Yeah, I
you had
mean,
dignity.
like for instance, when I first came into jail, an officer I knew from like 20 years ago still was working there, and he was like, "Hey, Rob, what's up?" And he stuck his hand out, and I looked at his hand like it was a snake,
Yeah.
because in the feds we didn't do, like it was like a line that you didn't cross. Eventually, I would start hugging officers, shaking officers' hands, start sitting in meetings with them as we, like talked about what we needed to do in the YME and conjured up different programs and stuff like that. But at that particular time, I still was with my arm on and then the feds.
And then you had to go back. So you'd taken it off, you'd gotten used to it being off, and then you had to go back to that environment where if you didn't wear armor, you're putting yourself at a little bit at risk, right?
And yes, so like that was because like honestly, like for 20 years I'm in the federal penitentiary, and this is a dangerous place, especially for people that's from DC. So for instance, like I kept a knife all the time at that time. But when I go back, not only did I know that I got Ivor, but it's just like I'm here, but my mind is not here no more. I'm in the world. So we doing more than our crimes work. I'm writing blogs. We doing policy. We trying to start the podcast. And it's just like physically I was there, but mentally I wasn't there. But it opened you up for a lot of hurts or your safety, because you don't react to things the same way that you used to react to things, or you are quote unquote supposed to react to things, and it just is not good. But
Yeah.
I navigated it.
But now, so the important thing about this, though, is that's when it wasn't until you were denied and you were going to be sent back that before it was just like a friendship thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The beginnings of More Than Our Crimes, it wasn't called that at the time.
No.
Is we had a blog on a platform called Medium. And the way I recall
Well,
it,
pretty much what happened was I got denied, and you was like, you should start journaling. And so daily I would journal and just write down how my day was and what was going on with me that day. And then you said like, well, Rob, you're a good writer, man. How won't you blog and I can put it on Medium and stuff like that. So I don't remember what the first post was, but I wrote that, and then I wrote the one what is it you always tell me? Oh, I'm all right.
yeah, see, that's the other thing. when you said that, when you talked about hardening your heart a little bit, I saw that in the fact that no matter what, I mean, some horrible things would be going on, things that most of us out here would be devastated by, and you always said, I'm all right. It's like, I'm all right. And to me, that was part of your armor.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's definitely part of the and it's a way, like, even with all my denials and stuff like that, I mean, that's what because you got to keep going forward. And so the only way to do the time is to keep putting one foot in front of the other and to the door.
And I'd be like, every time we had a setback, I'd be all jumping up and down, and I'd ask like one of your friends, "Oh, he'll be all right."
Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean he'll be all right? I'm not all right. Yeah. But so the other thing I remember about the time, the reason why, so the blog to me was both for you to sort of journal and get your, but the other thing was going on at the time. It was a presidential election, and very different from the one we just had. And there was actually talk of reform going on. But the thing that we noticed is that, yes, they were talking about criminal justice reform, but they were exempting or carving out anybody with violent crimes. And it occurred, so what I was thinking at the time when we started the blog too was like, wow, people do not realize, they hear the label, oh, you're in for this and it's violent, but they don't realize the story behind it.
And that's really how we came up with More Than Our Crimes, because they passed a bill in D.C. where they was basically saying that everybody that got locked up before 2000 would get 54 days good time for all the years that they had been in jail for every year. And what actually happened was that just pushed my parole date from 2024 all the way to 2021, which was right around the corner. But I knew that in theory, this bill was passed because they wanted to empty out the jails because of COVID. They wanted to let people go. But in practice, what would happen was that the parole board was going to deny a lot of people for past history or just because, and the bill would be moved for real. And that's pretty much what ended up happening. So what I tried to do was we wrote a petition, and I tried to get in front of it to tell these stores and try to get something done where the parole wouldn't be able to do that. I didn't know all the politics and all the things that was going on with our system and the parole system in D.C., but I partnered with Carver Singh, who was the Attorney General at that time, and Mark Schindler, and who's the co-director of Justice Policy Institute, and they helped us start. What would you call it?
It was a teach-in.
It was a Zoom teach-in that we hosted, and we talked about these topics. And because we had this Zoom teach-in, and I knew that there was going to be viewers that was going to be on the Zoom teach-in, I was like, well, wow, Pam, why don't we just start an organization? And
so that's when you were still at the jail.
Yes.
Right, yeah. And I think that's when, the what started off as a blog only morphed into More Than Our Crimes, which is a website and a podcast. And now we work to get D.C. residents inside to vote, because D.C. is one of the very few states, in quotation marks, because D.C. is not a state yet, but to actually allow, it's one of three actually states that allow people inside prison to vote. So we wanted to mobilize them. And then the other thing that happened along the way is that as you started introducing me to other people, and then my name got passed around, I think it's actually really funny that I heard that my More Than Our Crimes email address is on the wall of a couple shoe cells.
Oh, yeah.
That's how people get connected with me. But so this network is exploding.
Well, it showed that you're doing some good work.
Yeah. So the network exploded. So it began with just Rob. And like today, we have like more than 2,000 people, not just DC people, but across the federal prison system. And that's because along the way, people started talking to me about conditions in prisons. And there are some organizations that focus on specific things like solitary confinement, but there were a lot of other conditions that cause big problems that nobody was focusing on. So we started writing about that. But the point I want to make about this, as we expanded and started doing a lot more activities, some risks started occurring, because the BOP is a system. It's sort of like a machine, the way I see it. Yeah. It does not like people trying to stop its operations from just going on and churning the way it is. So we're going to talk a little bit about how Rob and I both felt that risk. There's one interview I did. There's a person you're going to hear from, goes by the name in prison as Askia Africa Burr. And he's somebody that is pretty fearless, actually. We're going to talk more about this, but he is so intent on changing the system that he will not stop. And he was in a penitentiary called McCreary in Kentucky, and wrote a scathing takedown of all the corrupt and inhumane practices there. And in addition to publishing it on our site, I got a DC paper called City Paper to publish it, and then a local paper in Kentucky covered it. And
I didn't know it went that far.
Yes. And the warden, everybody knew about it. And the next thing we knew, he was thrown in the hole, the solitary confinement, and then transferred to one of the worst prisons in the system, which is Hazleton in Virginia.
West Virginia.
So clear West Virginia is right. Clear consequence for speaking out. So you're going to hear him talk a little bit about his experience and whether he feels dissuaded from speaking out afterwards.
My homie, he's an orderly in the unit. He pulled up on me and he said, look, the two officers that are working right now, they're reading that article that you wrote. They're looking at it online, and they're trying to find out, who are you? Because quite naturally, in the picture, I don't have my glasses on. I write under my pen name, Askia Africa Burr, so they didn't know how to locate me. And he said, I think they're going to try to find out who you were. They put me in a hole. They came and they took me out my cell. The whole compound is locked down at this time. This particular day, they come to get me. They came and picked me up, ushered me to the shoe. While I'm back there in the shoe, I'm sitting in the cage in the bullpen, in the little kennels outside. I'm asking the officer, who's on duty in the shoe officer. I asked him, I said, what exactly am I backing for? You know, they just came to pick me up. Nobody's explaining anything to me. He said, hold up, I'll go look. And he went, he checked my lockup order, and he came back and said, you're under some sort of investigation. So right then and there, you know, I could put two and two together. It don't take rocket science to realize this just was, it was backlash. It was sheer, unadulterated retaliation in regards to my, you know, my prison journalism. I stayed in the shoe, in its entirety, I stayed in the shoe for 90 days, 3 months. And it was within the first week that I asked my unit officer, and she told me, she said, "More, look, it's already been decided that you're going to be getting transferred out of here." And we ended up in USP Hazleton, you know, one of the worst BOPs in the system. In our cells all day. Certain housing units can no longer control the lights in their cells. Prisoners are not able to program here. You know, we're just sitting around all day, just intellectually and emotionally and physically deteriorating.
As I heard more and more about conditions, I started targeting certain prisons, and Hazleton is one of them. In fact, you actually spent some time at USP Hazleton on your way back.
Yeah, I've been to Hazleton on the pound before, though.
Yeah, but I remember.
So when I came back to the feds, I had to go through Hazleton because they was using it as a holdover.
Right, and I remember hearing it's called Misery Mountain for a reason. So I not only did I hear such terrible things happening there, but also, and this is critical, I had a large number of individuals there willing to speak out, which is not always very common.
Mm-hmm.
Willing to speak out and use their names. And I had family members. We'll talk about that too. Unusual. So I started targeting Hazleton, and I went to the senators. I went to Senator Manchin, and I went to Durbin, who's chair of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. And I went to the media, although I had a hard time getting their attention. It resulted in a letter that was issued to the Attorney General and the head of the BUP at the time, scathing letter from Manchin and Durbin and several members of the Senate. It also resulted in the U.S. Attorney setting up a special center to receive complaints about Hazleton.
Mm-hmm.
And it included an email address so that people in prison could directly submit their concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happened is the prison blocked it. And so they couldn't do it. So I said to them, okay, send me what you would like to submit, and I will submit it for you. And almost immediately after, I was blocked. My email address was blocked. And that actually led, because I had a number of cases like this across the country, I ended up suing the BOP, trying to stop them. But so the more we got deeper into our work, there are risks. There are members of our network who paid a price.
There's members of your network that don't never say nothing because they don't want to pay the price.
So I already talked about the fact that I felt it because I think there were about 10 prisons that blocked my email address and made it very difficult for me to gather the information. And that's why I have a lawsuit pending. But what about you, Rob? So you also kept writing highly critical articles, very honest articles the whole time. What kind of what kind of repercussions did you feel?
I remember when we published a piece about lockdowns in the Politico, and I was in the challenge program, which is a challenge program, and the director of the challenge program I was in the office with, and she was basically telling me, like, I seen your article and my coworkers, or basically the administration, seen it, and like, you're a good writer, it's good, but I believe that, you know, like, the people that you're really writing for or trying to help ain't shit anyway, and you should free yourself because you can't help nobody until you get free. So get out of jail first before you do that. And then, like, you know, like, further in, nobody never really said that to me directly, but like our parole hearing, my last parole hearing, for instance, the whole hearing was about you. Like, he didn't ask me to talk, to basically show contrition, or was I accepting responsibility. Who was Pam Bailey? What is more than our crew? What is y'all doing? Where did you meet her at? How did you meet her? How long? Why she go visit all these guys? And it's like, what that got to do with me and my freedom?
And then you were denied.
And then I was denied. So
See, yeah.
What actually had to happen was that I went to the parole hearing from the shoe because I caught a shot in the visiting hall with you,
Yeah, shot means.
which is an incident report, a disciplinary
Yeah.
report. And one of my friends was told that when you tried to come back, they basically told him like, tell her to write another goddamn post about something. And at the time, you had just did an interview with NPR about lockdowns and with a highlight on Coleman.
Highlight on Coleman. That's
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the targeting right there.
And I have to tell you, I remember feeling it was the first time that I felt like, wow, the work that we're doing, that I'm doing, because is directly impacting you to the point it could cost you your freedom. And it really made me sit back and think, like, wow, yeah, I mean, is it goes,
it worth it?
Yeah,
we
and we
keep
talked
doing it?
about this. Is like, when is resistance worth the price you pay?
Well, like my friends told me when I came out the hole though before, like, man, you need to just chill and get out of jail or get out of prison. And I did move a little bit. Well, actually, I didn't have to.
Yeah,
because Ira came.
His release
and,
came.
like
Yeah.
the next few days, which was like a blessing in itself. But it's just like I see it wrong, and I know that prisons, especially in these feds and in these penitentiaries, they close in encampments, and nobody sees in, and so it don't matter like how many laws that the Senate passed, or like the stuff you talking about when you got them to do that in Hazleton, they can always just block it, or they tell you that we supposed to have these programs or that you supposed to be doing this, and they don't do it. But when the people come on and they're gonna do a dog and pony show, like they doing everything they supposed to do. So the only way that we gonna get some type of changes, or we gonna be able to change the system, is for people like us to do this type of work, and for people to be able to have the scruples to resist.
Yeah, well, you're talking about this, that there's certain people in history. There's George Jackson. I sent in a book to you about Navalny.
I don't know.
Like, you know,
Alexander Navalny.
Yeah, but the Russian opposition figure who insisted on going back to Russia after being poisoned and died for his convictions. And you can easily say that those people are stupid, foolish, because they could have gotten out. And yet, we were just talking before this podcast episode, if you didn't have people like them, I mean, think about the wins we've had throughout, like the civil rights movement. You know, if you didn't have people willing to put their lives in the line, like Martin Luther King Jr. did, if you didn't have them, we would never get anywhere.
I mean, that's true. And so you need to take all type of people to make a world. And everybody is going to not have the balls to do those type of things. I do. And I care about, you know, all my comrades that I left behind. So I'm going to continue to keep on carrying the mantle, and whatever, and when I was there and now, and whatever come with it, it come with it. Because I believe that, like, a man that don't have nothing, or a person that don't have nothing to die for ain't fit to live. And this is like my cause. This is what I believe in. This is what I want done. I know the way that they incarcerate America is counterproductive to rehabilitation. I know it's counterproductive to, and why I know it's the direct reason why the recidivism rate is so high. So it needs to be changed, and I'm gonna do everything in my power to try to change it.
And the thing I would add is, it's perfectly understandable that most people would say, I can't take that kind of risk. But what we can do is support the people who are.
Yeah, I mean, like,
to.
and that's what I'm asking. Like, whether it be mainly the guys in prison and their family members. And like, all I ask is just y'all fathers. Let's do the podcast.
Yeah.
Go on the website. Tell us. I mean, like, there's all type of information on there that's going on with your kids.
Pass it around to friends.
Pass it around to friends, and you know, through collaboration in those ways, you're fighting.
Yeah.
You don't have to put your neck on the line.
That's right, because others are. Yeah.
Because others are.
So this is a good place to end. In the next episode of Voices Unlocked, we're going to talk a little bit more detail about some of the laws and the institutions that worked against Rob's release, and those that finally allowed him to get out. So thank you for listening. I hope you subscribe so you'll get notice of the next episode.